what is cool is typically not popular, and then it becomes popular, and then it's no longer cool. So someone has to innovate, right? To me, like, innovation and creativity is all, like, that's what excites me about brands, not when they just do really good, clean, forgettable work. That's a David Carson quote. It takes those of us willing to, like, try something crazy to actually change the world, you know? And I've always just identified with that.
Today we had Drew Reilley on from Slash Creative, and we had an amazing conversation. If you don't like ADHD conversations, this episode may not be for you. There should be an extreme warning label on this episode because we hit a lot of topics. You will not be able to speed this up ×2 because we're talking fast. We cover a lot of ground. And if brand is your baby, well, tune up because this is going to be a good one. Without further ado, here's Drew Reilley. Welcome to Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today, I'm joined with the creative mind and talent behind Slash Creative on the East Coast. We've got Drew Reilley on the podcast. Welcome, Drew.
Hey, what's up, Mark?
Yeah, we got to meet in person. I've been aware of your work for quite a while, but we got to meet in person at the Boston Contractor Coalition. Yep. And you are the creative savant, nay, I say genius, behind the Modern Craftsman, both the old version and the rebrand, as well as NS Builder and all the stuff Nick's up to, plus thousands of others. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. I'm excited. I remember the one like little back and forth that we had sitting at the desk in the way back of the room. And it was like someone was talking and we probably shouldn't have been talking. And I was like, man, I could talk to this dude forever about nothing.
That's I think I booked you right then and there. I said, let's just do it.
I got an email like 10 minutes later.
Yeah, because that's the ADHD breeder. Like it's like if I can solve it right now, I don't have to think about it later. But I thought the same thing. We're sitting in the back, which is it's either I'm sitting in the front raising my hand, but since that was like my 5th contractor coalition, I was in the back, I guess, this time.
Sure.
So I'm used to being in the back because my last name is Williams. My kids very much now lament the fact that they're always last to be called. I remember that feeling when I was a kid. It's like, I wish my last name started with like an A or like
right.
Maybe
well, I mean, I'm a Reilley. That's kind of far back there too.
In the back.
Not all the way back as double. But you were saying before we started recording that sometimes your brain can't keep up with how fast you're like trying to process and speak and communicate. And we were just laughing because I have the exact same problem. You know what I mean? My wife is like, I don't understand what you're trying to say. I'm like, just find the meaning within the words because I'm already on the next 15 thoughts. You know?
I mean, honestly, ChatGPT is amazing because I can just like blob it all out there. And it's like, you just hit enter and it like organizes it, makes it sound beautiful. It's like, oh, that's what I was trying to say. Cause like, so, I don't know if you're like this, like I find half the reason I talk or have a discussion with someone, but much to their chagrin, is like, I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to say. And it's like, I have to say it out loud to see how you react to it. I'm like, oh, okay, that's a real idea.
Yeah, we're beta testing the conversation live.
Thank you, my person. Okay, well, this is going to be a self-help episode for those that have
it.
Out of curiosity, do you have ADHD?
Oh, I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it. I'm designing a website on the other screen. I'm writing a song in my head. And I'm listening to the story my 3-year-old is telling the neighbor.
As well you should. Actually, it was interesting. This would actually be a really interesting poll. I don't know very many owners of businesses that don't have some form of attention deficit disorder. What percent do you think I'm accurate at? Because a lot of them have a lot of energy and they have a lot of ideas, and not that means you have full-on ADHD, but you kind of get what I'm saying.
I think it's a spectrum, you know what I mean? And we all land somewhere on the spectrum, you know what I mean? Some of us are like more hyperactive and have a lot more energy, and some of us have 2 speeds, which is, I've always said, that's how I am. It's either a billion miles an hour or absolute slug. You know what I mean?
Oh, interesting. I have absolute all out or sleeping.
So yeah.
The slug is really
as I get older, slug mode has become basically napping.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a world-class napper, which would probably surprise a lot of people. My dad actually, this is well before internet and all that stuff and cell phones and whatnot. We had my dad was a home builder, and we had I didn't find this out till years later. And now as an adult, as a parent, I'm like, oh man, he was way ahead of his time. And so we had about 3 acres, And that was the time when you would meet people at night because people don't have cell phones or emails or any of that stuff, websites. And so, but it was eating together as a family was the number one priority. So we always had dinner together. I don't remember ever my dad not being there. But then he must have left and, walked 100 yards. He had a nice office detached from the house, and he'd meet people after hours and that kind of thing, which was normal in that time.
Yeah.
But I found out years later that he would come home every day after lunch and he would take like a 45-minute nap. And his office manager, secretary at the time, Margaret, used to always be like, David can't come to a meeting right now. He's in a meeting. And
Yeah.
way before, like, we all knew what that meant. And now I'm like, dude, if I could take a 45-minute nap every day, like, oh, that would be fire. I could totally do that.
Yes. I think the ADHD mindset is really, it's a superpower. And I've always said that I have superpowers that are both my biggest strength and my biggest weaknesses, right? The speed at which my brain can come to a decision or a solution on something is a superpower sometimes, but sometimes I overlook the details. But that's what's great about having a team is you have people to like keep you in check. And so I've always hired to my weaknesses in that regard.
That's so smart. We did a personality assessment, the DISC assessment, or a version of that, the red, yellow, green, blue. And it was interesting. Completely by accident, but at the time I think we had 4 employees or 5, but as an office we actually balanced out all of it. I was
way.
Yeah, which is weird. So I was all red, yellow, which if drivers, typically the owners are typically those 2 colors. Red, for those that haven't taken, are all driver, that kind of thing. Yellow is visionary. I don't know. I have like 0 green and blue, like almost like it doesn't exist on my radar. And so I laugh, like, I don't need any more red and yellows on my team because I got enough for the whole company and then some.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, you do need a healthy balance because, to your point, if you're in the visionary seat, you still need the nuts and bolts of it. And so anyway, a complementary team. I think too, I do agree with your statement that I think every pro is a con, every strength is a weakness, depending on its light. I'm just thinking about the animal kingdom right now because my kids are super into animals. But if you are really, really strong, and it's unlikely that you're also really, really fast. And if you're really, really fast, it's unlikely, like a cheetah, right?
It's the balance of light and dark. It's Star Wars, right? Like there has to be a universal balance. And in your head, really, I think it's the superpower becomes being able to be introspective enough to notice when those things are happen and catch it early enough on in life, which I unfortunately did not, to develop a tool set to like overcome those challenges mentally. Granted, because I'm like you, I did finally start to develop that tool set. I just didn't do it till much later, and I didn't do the traditional path. But I'm also like, I heard a quote the other day: "If you're going to miss the bus, do it running." And I was like, I love that so much.
That's a good saying, man.
Right? Man, my brain, I'm with you. I'm going all over the place. But
no, that's perfect. Well, let's give the audience a chance to get to know you. I really want to talk, you're a brand creator, and I have so many questions. I've pretty much become a complete, like, if brand was like a music group in the 60s, like I would be a groupie. Like I am so on board the brand trade. Like it's scary. I could talk about brand all the time. In fact, I talk about it so much, I think people think I probably can do it. I can't do it. I'm just like an uber fan.
Yeah.
So I'm in awe of what I've worked with a number of brand companies. I'm in the middle of working with one right now. And so I can never get enough of it, but I haven't always been that way. I'll maybe throw in some anecdotes as we go through, but why don't we start with your journey? How'd you get into it? You have a business. It sounds like it's even sort of changed a little bit recently. Why don't you give us a little 411 on what's going on?
Sure. I can give you the TLDR. So, because I think the value I had for our conversation is
what does
next.
TLDR mean?
The too long didn't read. So here's a superpower tool, right? If I'm going in blah, 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 which I have a tendency to do, the people closest to me know that they can press the TLDR button and I'm like, oh, this was the problem. This is how I solved it. Right. And okay, I'll give them me and my wife call it the thread. I need the thread of how you're mentally connecting this thought to the other one before you tell me all the other stuff. Anyways, there's ADHD for you. Asked me about
so that makes sense. This is going to be a wild ride. People that have issues, you can take your Xanax, pop your pill, and relax because this one's going to stress you out. Or this is finally the episode that you don't have to speed up. I had a lady come up to me one time, which it was very and she goes, "I listened to your podcast," and I'm like, "Oh, great!" And she goes, "And I want to thank you because I can only speed you up to 1.25. Normally I have to speed everyone up at 2x. I'm like, well, that's a high compliment because I know exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Ladies.
That's my wife. She's like, I listen to everything at 2x and every once in a while it's, whatever bumps it down. My background is in music, actually. I grew up, I feel like I've probably devoted my entire adult life to creativity in one way, shape, or form. Avoided the traditional path as much as possible with like a very angsty youth punk rock anti status quo mindset, which I feel like I still have. I'm just a little bit smarter about it now, a little more tactical. So I was in the music industry and I wasn't making any money. I was signed to a major label doing like 280 shows, 285 shows a year for like 3 years straight, still not making money.
What kind of music were you
It
creating?
was rock and roll. It's like aggressive, passionate, heartfelt, sometimes chaotic. It was a bunch of kids from southern Louisiana, from towns in the bayou that have one stoplight you've never heard of. And we were crazy, dude. We had incredible chemistry off the rip, and none of us really knew each other. We kind of got into a room, we're like, okay, this works. And that's how I feel like I can tell that if I sat, like when I sat next to you, I was like, okay, this works. I got this, right?
Yeah, we can basically start a band.
Check that's like, okay, I have a good gut check, right? But yeah, so I started designing t-shirts and album artwork and packaging and posters and stickers and stuff like that because we couldn't afford to hire anybody to do it. And I could draw, and I messed around on a laptop before, figure it out. And the red and yellow version of me is I'm just going to push through and figure it out, and no matter what it takes. And I was 20. I actually started designing when I was like 17. And so I had spunk and I had energy, and sleep didn't matter, and the world was my oyster. And I fell in love with just creativity, creating things. Like I said, even as a kid, art class was but I just figured out a way to turn that into something that can make a little bit of money on the side. And then we were on tour with Papa Roach, and we were the first band of 4 bands on that tour for about 2.5 months. And it started up in Boston, and we had never seen snow or ice or anything like that. We were getting paid about $100 a night, plus whatever we could sell in merch. But they made you match their merch prices. So you had to sell your shirts for the same price as Papa Roach shirts. But we sold more than they did because our shirts looked better.
Because they were so cool. And it was plus the counterculture. There's something about, like, isn't it funny? Like, a lot of these bands become counterculture. They're like, I'm going to literally say band's name, like Rage Against the Machine. Like, sure. Basically, you don't want to be part of the thing. So you create something, then it becomes so popular, it becomes part of the thing, the anti-establishment. Oh. But it's really the one-offs. I'm a small little company, right? We make, these Hydro Flask water bottles, if you're watching right now, right? They got a little cool little guy on them. I give these away only if you're a guest. I can't tell you how many people, like the kids, like, it's funny because I'll give them to the parents because they're the ones on that podcast, and their kids steal them immediately. And then the parents will ask me, hey, can I get another one? Because my kid, it's like, my joke with my building company is I'll finally be effective marketing when I'm retired, because all the like 12 and 16-year-olds will be old enough and rich enough to build a house with me, but I'll be done by that. Because like evidently I'm a huge hit in middle school. I am middle school design for my clothing and stuff.
There you go. I mean, it's cyclical. What is cool is typically not popular, and then it becomes popular, and then it's no longer cool. So someone has to innovate, right? To me, like, innovation and creativity is all like, that's what excites me about brands, not when they just do really good, clean, forgettable work. That's a David Carson quote. It takes those of us willing to like try something crazy to actually change the world, And I've always just identified with that. Now, I think you have to have a really solid understanding of the rules. And I didn't go the traditional path of understanding the rules of design. I learned it the hard way. I got into internships and junior designer roles and just failed until I figured it out. So yeah, non-traditional path forward. I had a couple of business partners that were like, hey man, your talents are like bigger than what you're doing here. We could support you in doing that. Let's give it a shot. And I'm not risk averse one bit. I had a full scholarship to LSU and quit to live in a van with 3 guys for 5 years, essentially. But I wouldn't change that for the world, right? Because I think that it puts me and my ability to bring passion and energy to inspire a team to do their most creative thinking, to then net something that's really, simple, memorable, and distinguishable, is non-traditional, but very effective. Because I think people really are wanting something different. They want a different path. And I'm not saying it's the best. I'm just saying, hey, this exists if that's.
I think one thing as like a consumer of brands, and I guess we all are, because we're all constantly being branded to. We'll talk a little bit about that storytelling arc later, which is so popular right now. But I think like I have a hard time creating. Like, I'm a kind of awe of the talents of you creating, but like I know it when I see it. Like when I see something, like I'd be curious to know, like on the spectrum of like how many people, how many like of a percentage. This is probably impossible to answer this question, but what percentage of people can actually create that brand you sync to? Then what people can actually like? I can't create it, but I can recognize one. I'm like, oh yes. And then how many people are just sort of oblivious to brand, like just completely?
Yeah.
Is there a segment that like just has no idea what's happening and they're just like
100%.
zombies?
Totally. And we call it the undesigned world. It's the food carts in New York City where they're selling fish and rice, and it's literally a picture of rice with a goldfish that they photoshopped on top of it. You know what I mean? But it's so effective and it works.
But if it's super pixelated like Nintendo, like 8-bit pixelated, now it's cool again because it's
it's cool again.
It's so bad that it's cool. Yeah.
We had a partner, this designer at one point, a guy named Matt Dawson, incredible designer. He started the crop design conference. He was a partner of ours for a while, and he introduced me to a designer named Alvin Deitch, and he's this guy from Georgia, and it's like he has honed the undesigned world so well that like he can design a Piggly Wiggly t-shirt that you're like, that's dope. I want that Piggly Wiggly t-shirt. That's cool. I actually like that type of thing, and it's really exciting to see what he does. And those are the things branding wise that excite me. I think there are people who can be taught to use any Adobe Creative Suite application, but just will never inherently develop the taste that it requires to say, or the confidence in their own taste to say, hey, I like this. I think that's what it should look like. And really, that's what my role is at Slash. I've been the creative director for about 6 years now. I was the designer, the only designer, the web developer, the creative director, the art director. I was everything. And I had 2 business partners. One got sick really early on and had to leave. He was like the business development guy. So my other partner, Lance, and I had to just pivot. And he and I can fail really well together. My other partner is a guy named Dustin. He and I actually started a high school streaming platform during COVID. So we reconnected there, and it was really cool.
Like music, like a Napster kind of thing, or like what era was it?
No, like high school sports. Right. So when you couldn't go to games and things like that, we had another partner. He is a podcast host, but he's a professor of religious studies at somewhere on the West Coast. Big guy, Brad Onishi. He wrote this whole thesis about how sports are in the United States very close to religion because of things like traditions and rituals and community.
That's actually that actually makes me sort of want to read that. That actually sounds really interesting.
Yeah, actually, you should talk to Brad because you both. It would be very, very interesting to
All right,
listen.
I'll make a note to reach out to you after. This episode is brought to you by Pella Northland. For 20 years, I've been using Pella windows, and I couldn't be happier to call them as a business partner, a trade partner, and someone that really supports us in our quality builds. You know, we use wood windows and doors on every single one of our homes, and 98% of every home that I've ever built has been a Pella window. I've gotten to know their team here locally as well as nationally, and the way that they support us as a craftsman, as well as they support our homeowners with their lifelong guarantee, has actually been a game changer for me. So when people ask me who I use, I recommend Pella. If you want to hear more about Pella's story, you can listen to episode 1, where I interview Peter and Ed from Pella Northland about their journey into the Pella ownership. So were you a founder of Slash, or did you get hired by Slash?
Yeah. So I was a founder of Slash. I think our biggest were like 7 or 8 employees. Right now we're myself, my business partner, Lance. We've got a lead designer, this guy, Justin Barnett, who's been with us for about 7 or 8 years. We have a brand strategist, this guy, Hunter Morgan, who's been with us the same amount of time. And then we have kind of a new guy, this kid Mason Fry, who's like, he's a carbon copy of me, just 15 years younger. Like we went to the same high school, same college, same degree. He plays guitar in a band. I think he's just got a better head on his shoulders at 25 than I did. And it's really cool to see like the creative approach that he has on certain things. That's the build out of Slash we made 10 years last week.
That's amazing. You know? That's incredible. Congratulations.
Thank you.
A decade. What'd you come up? I'd be remiss if I didn't ask how you came up with the name. Where did the Slash come from? Because it seems very fitting, having met you. It just seems like it's very fitting.
Yeah. So the name kind of came from like, I was having lunch with my partner, Dustin, and we were talking about these, and this is where you're going to love it. We're like, why couldn't Lamborghini partner with an architecture firm and build a Lamborghini building and then host some big event to launch some new Lamborghini product line or something like that? We're like, what would the brand look like? What's the activation look like for that? Who do you need to connect and talk to say, hey, we have this really crazy idea? Because my business partner, Dustin, he told me like money exists almost infinitely in the world we live in. Unfortunately, not everybody has it, right? But what doesn't exist infinitely is really cool creative ideas. And so he would challenge me all the time. I would say, oh, dude, I had this idea the other night. I wanted to make sculptures of guitars, but get my old guitar tech Spud to actually turn them into working guitars. But then I want to put them in like an art gallery. And as people walk by, the guitar they could play it, and it would have a speaker and it would have sounds, and it would be connected to an emotion, and the design of the guitar would be about an emotion. So there'd be fear. What does a fear guitar look like? And I'm like, am I crazy? He's like, no, I'd go to that.
Oh, for sure. That sounds, and it actually reminds me of, we walked by it in Seattle, I think it is like there's a guitar museum. And I remember like there's this giant spiral of like thousands of guitars going up the middle.
It's rad.
Have you been in it?
Yeah.
So anyway, there you go. Someone took the idea from this.
Oh, of course. But that's one of those things is like really interesting creative ideas, I think, is the human input that AI can never generate. And the execution of that is what I fell in love with through Slash. Is like, how could I take a crazy idea that would actually add value for a custom home builder? You know what I mean?
So the Slash was just like the abbreviation of it, like this and that, and just keep on adding to it.
Yeah. So it was like,
slash this.
We could do this slash this slash this slash
Gotcha.
this.
Yep.
But we fell into a trap early on where we were like masters of none. You know what I mean? Like we could do all this stuff, but we weren't hyper focusing. And I read a book called Hunter turned me onto it, The Win Without Pitching Manifesto. And it was like about not necessarily creating a niche, but like hyper focusing on your strengths, right? Brilliant book. Probably one of the most influential books that I've ever read. And it's teeny tiny.
I'm writing it right now. The Win Without Pitching?
Win Without Pitching Manifesto. It's so empowering as a business owner and as a creative. I urge anybody to check it out. But we ended up at that point kind of pulling out of like doing marketing and SEO and digital this and digital that and Google AdWords and Google search and stuff, because that landscape is so volatile and it changes so often that like I couldn't keep up with it. But the bigger piece was like our core values as a company, which pretty much comes straight from me, right? Is like, if I'm not helping someone or adding value, I don't really feel comfortable taking money from them, because I've worked at places that the butcher was pushing his thumb on the scale behind the piece of meat. You know what I mean?
That's Old Testament, man, right there. I love
Old
that.
Testament, yeah. And it felt icky. And a lot of the traditional path is very competitive and cutthroat, and there's so many snakes in the grass. And I'm like, man, I don't have it in me to be that kind of person.
So So how old are you when you started Slash?
Jeez.
You were 30. Okay. So
yeah, I just turned 40.
Yep.
Yeah.
The ripe old age of 30. It's funny. Everyone you can obviously go to school for design. Obviously you went through the school of hard knocks. And what I would imagine that you have in spades is you are creating and you're getting a reaction from your clients. And so in some ways you're creating, and I'm sure there's multiple paths to do stuff like there's for anything, but from an organic approach, you're using me. If I'm your client, how am I reacting? And I would imagine one of the reasons why your instincts and gut instinct is probably so good is it's probably a lot of it is innate, but I imagine a lot of it is honed through practice, because if you're constantly iterating on whatever ideas and seeing how clients react to it. I've always sort of been in awe of artists that draw right in front of people. I have worked with a few sketch artists that do architectural design, and there's very few, actually I can only think of one, that will literally draw right in front of the client, because it takes a certain amount of bravado and courage and strength, but also just intuition to be able to do that. And it's remarkable. And watching the client, like sometimes I watch the home designer do this, but oftentimes I watch the client's face, because it tells you so much. Yeah, it's in the nonverbal. It's really cool.
It's interesting, Slash, we're founded in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And we were headquartered there until 2020. We had a little remote office in Nashville for a while, which we called, it was Slashville. We were just like,
You should stay with that one. That's great.
I know. We were doing like little packages for our friends' bands. Hey, you need a t-shirt and a poster. I know you don't got any money. Let us at least hook you up so you stand a fighting chance out there against the people who do.
Nothing else you can sell better shirts than Tim McGraw.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Shout out Clint English, who's a designer from Louisiana, who is probably like one of the biggest music industry t-shirt designers that there is. Like, you name it, he's designed a t-shirt for them. Even if they're not even alive. Like Queen, Beatles,
wow,
Michael Jackson, he's designed for all of them. It's crazy. What were we talking about?
Just the talent evidently out of Louisiana is next to none here.
Louisiana is one of the most talented places in the world. It's because we don't have anything else to do, and we kind of have to come up from the rust and the mud. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it just snowed 10 inches there, so you got kids doing snow angels in the streets, and people are wigging out. Look at that.
Like, you can't even see out there. Also, because my office is pitch black.
Yeah, that's funny. Man, that's mainly just, and usually a lot of times we do dive deep on the stories, and everyone has an interesting story. But I think what's so interesting about what you do is, and now this is where I want to shift. Why should people care about branding? And this could really be for any industry, but I feel like building in particular, like the bar is so low. And I don't know why that is. And maybe I'm being hypercritical only because I'm just now, I wasn't this obsessed with branding when I started. I mean, a lot of people think branding is just a logo. It's so much more than that. The story, it's really everything. And maybe I'll just lead it with this and let you react to some of this. But I was thinking about this episode, like what we're going to talk about, because I could just fanboy brand all day long and people get bored with it. But I was thinking about, really, branding has been around. I mean, I guess you could say beginning of the time, but I was thinking about, like, what are some of the oldest brands I can think of? But I was thinking it actually went a lot further back than I thought, because like family crests have been around way before there was countries. It's portrayed in movies and far beyond, but like, let's say my grandpa, you go to the dry cleaners and they would have their initials on their sleeve or up on their collar. That's branding. That's branding. And personal branding. That was way before. They would
make a choice between script or serif or sans serif and color.
And like your cufflinks had your initials. Like I saw my grandpa's cufflinks. That's branding. But even like the Scottish, I had coffee this morning with the past client. She just got back from Scotland. Literally while we're talking, I'm like, I'm interviewing Drew in a little bit. I said, I got to bring it. So I wrote down Scottish tartan. It's your family name. Your brand is your family name. And I think in your family crowns, countries, flags, it just keeps going on and on. These are all brands.
Iconography, symbology, they all have to be designed and drawn, but there has to be consistency across the communication platform that at that point was worldwide and no one had the internet. So how are you supposed to say that this castle or this knight on a flying lion means this, and somebody across the world know that? Yeah, it's crazy, right? That's all of it.
I mean, even in the Olympics, I saw, and I blanked on the other country, so forgive me, but it was like there's only 3 flags in the world that don't have red, white, and blue in them, and one of them is Jamaica, and I can't remember the other one. I think is an African country. It's got green and yellow and whatever. But I only bring that up from just some like obscure thing I heard during the Olympics. Wow. But that's branding. On how many flags have red, white, and blue and different? The French flag, the Russian flag. There's so many different flags that have similar colors. But to your point, you had to identify friend and foe as far away and as early as possible, and colors was really the only way to do it. Yeah. Anyway, we've gone down a very interesting path here. But
that's right. So imagine at this point, 10 years in, I was hired 2 years before I started Slash. I was working at a web design agency called Designs Interactive for Orhan McMillan, who's one of the most beautiful people on the face of this earth. And I'd done a big campaign for a jeweler, and one of the jeweler's buddies said, hey, congrats. It was like nominated for National Addy Awards and stuff like that. One of his buddies was like, hey, you got to hook me up with your dudes. And so I get a call, hey, we're going to do, this guy's like building sheds and he wants to start doing like remodeling and things like that. Doesn't have a logo, doesn't have anything, just has a name. And I was like, cool. I don't even need to talk to him. Can I just do my thing and like make it look as cool as I think it should look? And they're like, yeah. And I don't even think I talked to the guy beforehand, but I was like, I like how these super simple nails, when they're crossed, creates this like little iconography, and it's industrial, but when it's small, white on black, it feels really high end for some reason. Let me lean into that. And there was the tagline that was just working. build, design, build, repeat, or whatever. You know what I mean? And then I did the website, and then that guy starts saying, "Hey man, people keep taking my stuff." I'm like, what do you mean? He's like they're literally like their name of their logo, and then they put design, build, repeat, or they're taking like the cross nails and then putting their name under it. I was like, well, it's because your shit's badass. And when I left that agency, that guy was like, hey, I want to like change. I want to whatever. And I went through, I'm a loyal, honest guy. So I called my old boss. I was like, hey, this is what's going on. Are you cool? And he's like, yeah, man, go ahead. And 10 years later, now to this day, you know, I'm still working with them, building that brand. And it's become one of the biggest, I think, brands in you guys' industry. And it's one of the most simple brands. But the challenge that we have is like, imagine designing the NS Builders brand 12 years ago. And I'd say 60% of Slash's work is builders. And it wasn't ever intended to be that, because I like doing packaging and fitness and music and entertainment and lifestyle and things like that too, restaurants. But it was just like, hey, it connected. And so the challenge that we have is, how do you then, through brand, differentiate the hundreds of builders that we've worked with over the last 12 years? Because, and I think I said this in Boston, it all starts with strategy. You have to know yourself before you can explain to someone else what matters to you, right? Let's identify those things. Because when Hunter does brand strategy, it's like, you want craftsmanship, you want trust, you want loyalty, you want empathy, communication, collaboration, pride, right? Cool. All of those, none of those can be in your shit now. We had to throw all of those words out and find what makes you as a builder you. Because branding isn't, and this was the whole talk, and this is from a guy named Blake. He's the creative director at Matchstick, big agency. He said that branding is, it's not your logo, and it's not your website or the homes that you build or your face or you and your personality. It's the sum total experience that people have with every single one of those things, right? So when you take a meeting, when your dad took a meeting with somebody in the evening, right? He was saying, this is how much I'm willing to put into this relationship, to meet after hours when my family is, you know, just finished eating. Or, you know, like our grandfathers who had the embroidery, they're saying like, this is who I am. And I want to, through subtle things, show the world. That's why Pinterest is so incredible, because everybody is on Pinterest saying, I identify with that. I identify with that. I like that. That's me. That's me. That's me. You know what I mean? And they're Pinterest, honestly, is one of the most underutilized. Like, here's the trade secret. Ask your client for access to their Pinterest board. That's it. And you'll know everything about them.
If they use it.
If they use it.
It'd be interesting to know the demographics. Yeah, plenty of men obviously do. I do it for the company, but I don't post it. I have someone that does our Pinterest strategy, and my wife had it. A lot of my clients have it, but predominantly it was my women clients that had it. Mm-hmm. And I found out the other day that it is second only to Google in search power. Pinterest is a behemoth.
Yeah, dude.
And the amount of hits that we get to our website and our strategy. And I was, just because I'm not a user, I think that sometimes, I'm not going to call it the owner fallacy, but let's call it just a user fallacy. Just because we don't use it doesn't mean it's not popular. And mm-hmm. just because we do something or use something doesn't also make it popular. It could be, or it couldn't be, but you do need some secondary or tertiary points, like a team, like you said before. You kind of need your team to be like, if nobody is doing it, that might be a red flag. If everybody's doing it, like, oh, okay, this is onto something. And I think for a while, part of it was a budgetary thing. I mean, if you have an endless budget, sure, do everything. But for me, it was like, I never really did much for blogging a couple of years ago. Now we push out a ton of blogs. So we're doing, for the Curious Builder, because we have so much going on, we have one a week. For Mark Williams Custom Homes, my building company, we do two a month, sorry. But what we found is it took a while to ramp it up, but then once it ramped up, mm-hmm. along with Pinterest, there's a back end strategy, because obviously you're pinning the blogs and it's this very meshed system where this ecosystem, it's like the ocean. You need big fish, small fish, but a healthy ocean has a little bit of everything in it. It can't just be one thing. And anyway, so we pulled back on Pinterest for budgetary reasons last year, and then we saw a significant drop on our website traffic. Mm-hmm. And I had commented on it to the person that does our Pinteresting and blogging, And she said, well, we pulled that back. And I said, well, let's put it back in. We put it back in. But she's like, well, keep in mind, it's going to take a couple months to get it back to what it was. It was just an eye opener to me. Persistence. I was going to mention this quote earlier because it applied to you specifically, as well as I think most entrepreneurs. And I'm going to butcher the quote, but essentially, the river doesn't carve through rock because of its power. It carves through rock because of its persistence.
Mhm.
And what's in just even like a dripping, drip, 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 100 years, 1,000 years, whatever, eventually that water is going to go through that rock.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we think about the arc. Here you are creating stickers and posters, and a lot of that's was it Hamburg? Wasn't that the Beatles' journey that they played like
Mhm.
an insane amount of hours when they were like teenagers? And then
Yeah.
the whole 10,000 hour thing, right? They came back to England and they're like 19. They'd already played so much music. They knew everything. But that was your 17, 18, 19, 20. That was a lot of iteration for you to learn, act and react. And I think one of the things that has come out a lot in not just design books, but just in general, is if the feedback loop gives you instantaneous feedback, you learn so much faster.
Mhm.
And I think, again, this was Malcolm Gladwell when he wrote about this. I'm not sure which one of his 18 books I read, but it was the surgeons have so they talked about doctors. A lot of doctors actually, once they reach a certain point, don't keep progressing in their knowledge. And it's not
Mhm.
because they're not reading. It's not because, but like if you're a like diabetes type 2 or whatever, like if it takes a decade for you to manifest type 2 diabetes or whatever, the feedback loop is not long enough, or sorry, not short enough that you can iterate quickly enough to gain
Yeah.
knowledge on it. But like a surgery, like if I cut you open to do open heart surgery and that didn't work and you died, like I found out
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah. I
quickly
know
that was
exactly
a
what.
really bad way to
Yeah.
do it. But if you come back and it's like successful, anyway, they get a lot of practice. And it was just really interesting, this constant feedback. And if you're in an industry where you get a lot of client feedback or a lot of interaction with if your brand touches and feels a lot of things, you're going to find out what works and what doesn't. I guess the second question is, are you paying attention? And
Right.
are you willing? I think sometimes the brand becomes your baby. And I would imagine you have a lot of stories where people are unwilling to
Mm.
it looks like I hit a note there. Tell me a story about that. That sounds like you
Okay.
hit a
I mean,
chord.
it's the same. It's also one of the reasons why I love working with builders and architects and interior designers is the process of ideation, talking to a client, understanding what they like, what their wishes are, what is their dream, and then using your skill set to get as close to that, but also telling them along the way, like as a guide, what you think is the best choice and things like that. It's the same thing that you guys do, right? So it's probably the same number of times that you've had a client say, no, I don't like that finish. And you'd be like, that's going to look bad if you want this finish. Or if you want me to do this to this room, it's not going to function very well. They're like, no, no, no. And then you're like, okay, at least I said it, right? You said about your kids before we started recording that they're like really into animals, right? Do you
Yeah.
know that Animal Planet, Shermeyer, Sagi Haviv is the partner that I took a course from at Adobe Max. He did the logo. They had two presidents. One president said no blue, and the other president said no elephants. Do you know what the Animal Planet logo is?
Blue
A blue
elephant.
elephant. That dude was told specifically from the two presidents of Animal Planet, no blue from one and no elephant from the other. His whole workshop was the client is always wrong. That was the title of it.
Oh man, I want to watch. Is that exist somewhere where you could watch it?
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure that he's got it somewhere. But if you, I mean, listeners, just Google or YouTube or Instagram search Sagi Haviv, SAGIHAVIV. I pull so much inspiration from him, and it's interesting though because he does like the U.S. Open logo and Allstate's logo, like big Fortune 500 brands like that. And I'm not trying to do that. You know what I mean? I just want to make like 45 White Oak logo look sick.
Right. This episode is brought to you by Adaptive. For over 2 years now, I've been using Adaptive. It's an incredible game changer. It's AI technology based. It helps you with bill pay. And as a builder, there's very few things that anger our subs more than not being paid on time. Well, those days are gone. Not only do you know exactly where you are, but you can pay people through your ACH channels, making draws extremely quick. With one click of a button, which used to take hours, my office staff is now able to generate a draw to the bank or to the client in literally seconds. The thing that I appreciate the most about Adaptive is their ability to keep changing. We've given them 3 or 4 feedbacks on things that we need as builders. And within just a few months, they're rolling those things out. This is saving us hours per week and days per month in terms of our efficiency. If you're looking to upgrade your business, I'd highly recommend Adaptive. You can reach out to them at adaptive.com or listen to the Curious Builder podcast, episode 15 or episode 80, where we dive into their origin story. The hard part about being a creator, and you can be a creator without being able to, like, I assemble the team and I have this idea and this vision, and you guys are so talented in bringing it out, making it so much better. The team approach is just, I don't know how it's just a winning formula because everyone gets a little say in it, right? And it becomes better. But seeing the vision all the way to the end, I think it's chicken and egg a little bit. But without the idea, it doesn't matter how much drive you have. But if you have an idea with no drive, it's just an idea. And the world is full of bars alone. If that was the case, bars would be the best laboratory on the planet because the amount of ideas that are generated between buddies and friends, not saying they're bad. I'm just saying, like, most of those ideas just stay there. And the real magic is the drive then that happens behind it. Anyway, I guess.
No, it's funny you say that. When I don't drink, I haven't drank in almost 10 years. But when I did, I did. And there's a guy, a buddy of mine, he's an owner of an agency from back home. And in our 20s, that's what we did. We just go to the bar and come up with ideas. But we'd go execute them every once in a while if they were like executable, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, I think that, you know, we've had times where people are like, I don't like this, or, you know, you've got to steer them in the wrong direction. So that book that I was telling you about, the Win Without Pitching Manifesto, that's a really great story example. We were working on the Pythian Market in New Orleans, which is a historical building downtown New Orleans on Poitras. And it's like 4.5 stories. And this development company came in. They're like, we're going to turn the top 3 or the 2 middle stories into residential. The top floor is going to be like an event space. The bottom floor is going to be a food hall. And then the second floor is like a blues bar, jazz club type thing. So we went in there, we did naming, we did branding, we did strategy, we did wayfinding signage, interior, exterior signage. It was a 2-year-long project, and a lot of which that we couldn't really share. But the developers were from New York. The team, like you're talking about, that they had put together to run different touch points within the ecosystem of that were from Los Angeles. And then you had the people in New Orleans that were like the feet on the ground, you know? And everybody had such a big ego. They all wanted to have their own finger on these decisions. We talked about color palette for 3.5 months, Mark. Whoa. And it was, I think we should do that. I think we should do this. And I was so exhausted by it. And I was so like green at the time, pun intended, that I was just like, y'all just tell me what colors you want it to be. And then I read that book, the Win Without Pitching Manifesto, that Hunter was like, hey, you got to read this. And the second I put it down, I picked my phone up and I called the team and I said, the colors are this, 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 and this. This is why the colors are this. I'm going to send you the color codes and everything over the weekend. And then next week, we're going to talk about strategy for what next steps are as far as implementing those colors into signage, wayfinding, uniforms, everything. And they were like, okay. They just needed someone to confidently step in there, and instead of saying, this is my opinion, this is what it needs to be. And this is the reasoning why. So I found with home builders, it's really like websites, right? We get a ton of positive feedback about the NS Builders website, right? And here's the secret about the NS Builders website. The back end of the NS Builders website is a nightmare, right? Because we've been building it and adding and tweaking for years. And technology changes, and it's so difficult to keep up with. But that's what excites me, is like, okay, let's overcome this challenge. What's the creative solution here? And how can I say, okay, when someone comes to me and says, hey, I saw the NS Builders website, I want you to build me a website just like theirs. I'm like, I can't do that. You know what I mean? That website was developed over designed after 10 years of strategy and changes. And like you're saying, like we refreshed his brand only 3 years in. Not a ton changed. We just took a bunch out. And then we did another refresh a couple years ago, you know? I think brands are a living, breathing thing. They grow and they change. And the why you rebrand, I mean, I could give you the list of why big brands rebrand, and it all makes sense, you know? But there's, just like what you guys do, there's like a trust factor. Like, you have to trust your builder. You guys have to trust us that we're going to make the right decision, and we're not just going to give you what everybody else wants. I've had clients in the past like fire us halfway through, and they're like, we're just going to make our website look exactly like these guys' site, and we're going to do it on Wix. We're just going to do it ourselves. Like, okay. And it's a challenge, but Hunter always talks about the enclosed cognition piece. Like, you have to be super confident in your brand when you wear it. That's why people who don't drive Harleys wear Harley shirts, because they say I identify with that. But how are you going to feel confident in something that you ripped off of somebody else just because they're successful? And that maybe is those people, that one group that you were talking about earlier, that don't care, blind to brand.
Yeah, maybe they're blind to brand. The thing is I think your brand, and this is going to be a little, I mean, I know I'm going to get an amen from you, but I think maybe some people might think this is too, I think brand is as important as your last name. And if people that are really proud of their last name, like their lineage or their family or their members, like that's you. And what I'd be kind of curious to ask you about, so like family, I mean, I think one of the reasons why builders are probably a lot of your client is a lot of them, nobody tells you when you're 23, like, I wish I hadn't named my company Mark Williams Custom Homes. For one thing, it just takes up a ton of space. And so it's super annoying. I always wish, in fact, we went through, I've done three or four brand refreshes. One when I met my wife, she needed to remodel her husband's company, I guess. But she was not wrong. She was right. And this funny thing is, I felt like I just did it. And then years go by, and I think maybe it might just be a me thing, but let's just call it a man thing too. And it's like, my wife was like, "You need to do it again." I'm like, "I just did it 10 years ago."
Yeah.
And I'm sure you get that a lot. And her comment is, she's very good. She said if she hadn't been a physician, she would have been a designer, and she would be good at it. She's really good. But she said, your brand is who you were. It's not who you are, to your point about living. And so I did it again. I was like, oh, wow. And the reaction of my past clients, of new clients, the clients that didn't know who you were, take notice because it's something different. And the clients who already knew who you were and recognize that you've changed, ultimately for me, is I was built really high quality homes, but now I build $2 million to $6 million homes. And 5 years ago, I built million to, or it doesn't matter the number, but they're more detailed, they're more sophisticated, they're higher end. And like the brand and what I'm interested in, the clients that we were gravitating towards, we outpunted our coverage. We were just we were playing a different game, and the brand needs to reflect that, to your point of it growing. And I couldn't be more happy. It was interesting because I really thought about the reason I wanted to rebrand was, I'm 20 years in. If I'm ever going to have a shot at selling my company, I got to get rid of Mark Williams Custom Homes. It's just too much. It's not quick. It's not simple. The logo's too big, blah, 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 blah. We went through this whole brand exercise. We got it down to one company name, did the whole, and I couldn't do it. And then I remember talking to a few people outside the company, and I said, then here's the deal. Whether your brand is your name or not your name, your company's not sellable either way right now. Because, and I've talked about this elsewhere on the podcast, that if you can't leave your business and it succeeds, you have a job, you don't have a business. And that's a real eye opener for most entrepreneurs. It was for me, because I have a job. I don't have a business. I have a job right now. I'm a company of 3, soon to be 4. But if I leave, there is no Mark Williams Custom Homes. There's no whatever I want to call it. The company just collapses. It doesn't exist. And oddly enough, it was during that brand exercise that I went on Brad Levitt's podcast, and I didn't even know what a podcast was. This was just, is it 2 years, 3 years ago? I'm in the time warp here. I went on, I'm like, people talk to other people and just talk about business. And it's like 30 days later, I started the podcast with no plan, but I was in the middle of, I was so lucky because I was in the middle of branding, and I had, shout out to Kim Sen and Sen & Sons. All the word framing, all my curiosity was my number one trait when they did the brand discovery on me. And because the podcast is representative of who I was, the Curious Builder, you can see where this is all going. I had such a clear vision of what I wanted the podcast to be. I did not have a clear vision of what I wanted the building home. The thing I had for 20 years that I still have. And this new thing was so much clearer. And it's interesting to me, like, it was going through that exercise just at the right place at the right time. Yeah. And I'll look back and be like, wow, was that,
wow.
It was just a fortuitous set of circumstances that all happened at the same time.
Well, the stars align, right? I think that's what happened with me and Nick, and why, over the last 12 years, I've built multiple brands alongside him, and that we have trust. And I'm not perfect, dude. If anything, he'll tell you that I take longer than anybody else on earth, but my stuff's always awesome when it's done.
So I was going to ask you about that on the creator side. Do you get, When I look at the stuff you put out, nobody gets to see all the hard work behind it. I guess that's no different than any other business. You see a finished home that Nick builds, but you don't see the
Sure.
2 years he spent in the trenches in the mud doing it all. So brand build, no business is probably, they're all kind of similar this way. Nobody sees all the real work except the people on the inside. Where I'm going with this is like, you come forward with, you show like your brand presentation, you're maybe showing a couple ideas, or be the central logo, and there'll be like a couple sister logos or whatever the nameology is in that whole thing that,
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about, but I don't. And but like all the work, all the failed designs, all the stuff that didn't work, how do you as a creator do that? And like, how do you know when it's the right one? How does it click? And second, well, I'll let you answer that question before I confuse you.
No, I think that's a really great question, because it's different for everybody, just like it's different for every builder or every architect. Like when they say, hey, this is done. And there's a lot of ways that we challenge ourselves and check ourselves at Slash. And I think it comes from probably a lot of my anxiety as like someone who's a perfectionist and a people pleaser. But like, while those are character defects, I think those are superpowers as well. So Justin and I have been working together for 8 years at this point. When he came in, he was a college student doing it for credits, and his portfolio was ballpoint pen sketches of like giant noses with basketball shoes on. It was wild. And now he can design circles around me. He's a brilliant designer. But he and I, and even when like Matt Dawson was with us, and my partner Lance isn't a designer, but he's got taste just like you do, right? We just have open discussions internally, and we have hard conversations well internally, and we challenge each other. Hunter, the reason why he's been so instrumental to our business is that the first day, maybe it wasn't the first day, but the first week Hunter was here, he did the same thing that Justin was doing. He was 22, 21 doing an internship, and he was like, why did you design that logo like that? I was like, well, the name of the company is this. I had a 30-minute call with the owner. They were talking about something, and it just, an idea popped in my head and I executed it. And he's like, so then you put together like an entire pitch deck around that idea? I was like, yeah. He's like, how do you know that's the right answer? I'm like, what do you mean? It's just like, it's my gut. So I've been functioning for the better part of 25 years at that point, 30 almost, with just gut, you know? And he said, well, what if I asked you a couple of questions? Or what if I could ask them a couple of questions just to due diligence? His brain is not, he's the opposite of my brain. He's the analytical thinker and things like that. So what we do is our process changed. Hunter introduced brand strategy to Slash, and it's the very, very first thing that we do. And it's a non-negotiable as part of our process, because I can't objectively say that this logo design is successfully checking off the boxes we said it has to, while defending the art that I've sprinkled onto it.
Is it easier to design for a person whose company they represent, because you can take all these nonverbal cues, or is it easier to design for a company that's like this non-living thing that has core values? I think the thing about core, and I get they're important, but what's annoying about core values is I could just go to ChatGPT and be like, send me the 5 best core values. It's just,
Yeah.
unless you actually are them, unless they're you, to your point. That's why you can't take works
Yeah.
for Nick or for me or like it is you. So how do you do it when there's not a person? Like, I understand, because I don't know if this is I think this is appropriate analogy. Like, I actually have a hard time building a house without a client. It's been 16 years. In fact, I'm doing one right now, because I do really good work when I have, like, if I'm building your house, I get to know you, your family, your lifestyle, your goals. My favorite quote last year was boundaries create freedom. Well, what I mean by that is you're telling me it might be budget. It might be your family size. It might be your taste. It might be you, whatever it is. I'm able to then take all of that and put that, in here, in 20 years of experience, and work with partners and blah, we build you this beautiful home. Anyway, how do you do that when you don't have a subject to base it around? Because you were shaking your head like it's actually,
I think they're both difficult, right? Because there's a lot of times when like a sole proprietor, or like a single owner, or it's a personal brand for somebody, or whatever it is, they've got a lot on the line, right? This is their baby. This is sink or swim for them. Oftentimes they are a little bit more critical with certain details. And really it is, the challenge there starts from a strategy perspective, and it is, how do you get them to understand they have to disconnect themselves from the business, right? In order to create something that speaks to the client effectively without like subjectively causing the client to be upset about it, right? Does that make sense? It's like they still have to be confident in it, but I can't tell you how many times C-suite exec or just single owner has said, I don't like that. And I've said, well, it's not for you to like. It's for your client to like. Like, I get it.
That's
You're
actually
going to
pretty
print
funny.
this on a shirt and you want to feel like a badass when you walk into the room with that on. And that's my goal. But you have to meet me in the middle somewhere. And that's just conversation. So how do you do it when you don't have a person? You have more conversations on the strategy end. You talk to every stakeholder. You talk to anybody you possibly can. Now, budget constraint has always been the issue there, because what I'd like to do and what big brands do is these focus groups, and they go talk to 100 past clients or 100 past people who purchased a product or something like that. And they research and pull all this stuff together, and then they create the brand strategy. And yes, you can do that on Chat GPT, but Hunter is an avid refuser to use Chat GPT at Slash. And I think that's wonderful, because his job is to bring the human nature out of a brand. Because if you think of a brand as a person, like we were talking about earlier, how do you identify that person? Oh, they're fun. That's not really identifying a person. So
It's our imperfections. It's the,
yeah,
the humanity of the connections with people. I'm reading reading this book right now called 4,000 Weeks. Have you ever heard of it? It's pretty wild. It's basically your mortality. The average person lives 4,000 weeks.
Dude, you want
And
to know what's crazy about that?
what's
And
that?
I don't have the sweat. I was wearing a 1612 sweatshirt earlier. One of my best friends started a lifestyle coaching group, initially called 1612, because
What does
that's how
that
many
stand?
weeks he
Oh,
had left when his dad died. So he was like, okay, I have 1,612 weeks left if I die when my dad died. And
it.
he has a big Kentwood. I don't know if y'all have Kentwood.
What does that mean?
Kentwood's a water company.
Oh,
They just bring the big like
oh, it's
water
ours is
cooler.
Culligan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's got a big Kentwood water jug, and he puts a marble in it at the end of every week and asks himself, did I make that week count?
It's pretty baller. That's interesting. The buddy who turned me onto it, shout out to Tony Kakanda. He listens to the podcast, and I run with him a lot. So I do a lot of ultra and trail stuff, and he's just an absolute badass. But he's
Yeah.
also probably become one of my best friends because I spend so much time exercising with him, and you're talking about life and
Yeah.
all this stuff. Anyway, I'm fine with, more. Actually, I was on the Modern Craftsman recently. Tyler was asking me about death and mortality and all these things. And it was a great conversation, and I think it's needed. But where I'm going with this was they actually make a calendar. It's an inverted calendar. So it starts with 4,000. So that's when you're 4,000 weeks is 80 years. You can get one for 100 years or 120. And basically every week it's reversed. Rather than building up, you go down, like the sand is running out on their time.
Dude,
And I'm
I don't
fine with
like that one bit.
I know, I don't either. I like the concept of it. I'm aware of it, but I don't need to look so you can get this as a poster. I don't need to sit down every day and look at I'm going to die, because I definitely believe, called placebo effect. Like if you think it will happen, or if you believe it, like I believe in that. So to me, I would get the 120-year one, because I'm like, I got lots more time, and I get like the urgent. I think everyone has to deal with this with the personality side. So I like your buddies. Like I'm adding. I like that. That's adding. I think it's a healthier approach. I think if you're taking away, I think that's a negative. I think that's it's a dangerous mindset, in my opinion.
I totally agree with that, because it puts you in the scarcity mindset eventually.
Yep.
And then anxiety becomes and fear of the inevitability becomes the driving force, versus inspiring yourself to be the best version of yourself, which when he started his clothing brand, it was around the same time Nick started NS Builders. And so I've been working with him pretty much ever since. There was a couple years where he went and did he did a rebrand and things like that himself, but he's a 3-time world champion in the Highland Games. He's an author. He's an absolute monster. You know what I mean? His name's Matt Vincent. He's been on Stone Cold's podcast. Joe Rogan talks about him. He's an absolute monster of a human being, and one of my greatest, if not my closest friend. And he said that when I was doing the band thing, I inspired him to like, just go do what you want to do with life. And now he teaches, we're about to take over the clothing brand and run it for him. Because he rebranded from Hate Brand Goods to Not Dead Yet.
Oh, I was just going to guess that it was Not Dead Yet. And that's based on the 1216. That's based on his dad then, isn't it?
Yeah, 16.
That makes way more sense.
Yeah.
It's a quick side note on that is just because you have a great brand, sorry to rip on this, doesn't mean they fit great. So you posted the pink shorts with the green, with the pink shorts with the green alligators, the
Yep.
blue.
It's like a blue alligator.
And
on
I
pink
just
shorts.
love color because, during my business days, like I have to be a professional, but like outside of that, like my running shirts are like fuchsia. Like I want the
Sure.
loudest, most annoying color because I just like color. And
Nike Volt Yellow is my favorite color.
Ooh, Volt Yellow. Just the name Volt
Yeah.
makes me want to get up and run right now.
Yeah,
See you later,
right?
guys. Podcast over. But anyway, so I got those shorts. I didn't read the notes. The inseam's like 3 inches. Like I can't wear those anywhere because it's like the boys are coming out. So they're when I sauna alone shorts, but they're super cool. But it's like nobody.
Matt has a podcast. You should talk to Matt on the podcast too.
All right,
his business stories are really, really great too. And I mean, he's obviously
he sounds. I want to hear was he also from Louisiana?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's from Sulphur,
so we got
Louisiana.
We got like poet warriors down there. You got.
Dude,
you got this guy in my mind. He's like 6'7".
You have no idea.
I want to do like the boxing intro, like weighing in at 317 pounds of chiseled marble out of Chiselville, Louisiana.
Yeah. No, his whole thing, so talk about brand. You'll love this. All right.
Yeah.
So this dude he was always a big guy, LSU track athlete,
big and fast. See, we were just talking about. You can't be good at both. This guy's he's a unicorn.
No. He threw heavy things.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes way more sense. I thought he was going to be a sprinter on top of this.
No. And mass moves mass. He's a big dude, right? Well, he's not anymore. He's chiseled now. He's in the best shape of his life. He's, I think, a year older than me. It's unreal. 7-something knee surgeries or some crazy stuff. But so he starts doing the Highland Games and he's like, I'm actually good at this. And I'm beating all these guys who are bigger than me. And me and him are just kind of jokesters. We always have been. That's why we liked each other. He won the Highland. I don't know if he won it wearing it, but most of the time he would wear a bright pink kilt, pink knee-high socks, a fake mustache, aviator sunglasses, a big trucker hat, and go compete in the Highland and then beat everybody. And he was loud and he'd scream when he'd throw and then he'd laugh. And it was this character. Like we always had these characters and that's brand. You know what I mean? Oh. He stood out. People were like, oh my goodness.
You know who I'm thinking of
I'll teach you how I threw things.
I'm thinking of Macho Man Randy Savage right now. Exactly. And Hulk Hogan. Like those glasses, the little whatevers and brand is everywhere. We didn't even... Obviously, every conversation is unique and fun. And this podcast makes me just want to do another back-to-back one because I've got like 1,000 more brand. This is what's so cool about brand, though, is storytelling. And we didn't get into it in this episode, and that's fine. In terms of, I don't care if you're starting your company. If you are and you listen to this episode or you're aware of it, invest in it. It's worth it because your brand, there's the term, the silent salesman, people that are selling your company when you're not awake or not on your team, not on your payroll. Your brand is all of those things. And it's your story. And it is so powerful. And I also think because it's you mentioned like the herd is going one way, you went another. By going a different direction with brand help and making sure you're smart targeted here is because you still have to do a good thing. But the thing is, if you have a good brand, I mean, I'm thinking about like clothing lines. Like if a clothing line has a bad brand, but it's just great, you'll buy it. If you have a so-so material, but your brand is amazing, people will still buy it. And hopefully you're good at both. Because if you're good at both,
you're Nike.
Yeah, you're Nike. You're all, because all of them spend so much money on their brand and their image. Brand ambassadors is such a popular term. Shoe Dog and Jordan and all now. Yeah. Anyway, that we could talk forever about brand.
Dude, I'm down. Let me know. I'm available this time next week.
Next time, I'm available 24/7. I'm also available for hire people. Hire me.
Yeah. Well, I've moved into a fractional creative director role at Slash, kind of doing that. Like you mentioned earlier, like if you left, you have a business right now. Right?
I have a job. I have a job. I don't have a business. Yep.
And that's how I've been functioning for the last 10 years. And finally over the break, we kind of made the change to where like, I'm going to go do some fractional creative director work at a couple of other brands and try to add and drive as much value with just a handful of brands, while the team that I've been talking about most of this podcast, I feel like because they're just incredible, they got it. And I'm still going to like creative direct projects, and I'm still going to approve things before they go out and stuff like that.
You know what this reminds me of? This actually, here's a good analogy for you. You can use it in your new brand pitch deck. So you know how like in soccer or football, as the rest of the world calls it, you know how they loan like a player to like, hey, Real Madrid is going to get so-and-so for like, I don't know enough about 3 matches. Yeah. But you never hear about people trading coaches. What if it was like the middle of the NFL season and like, oh, Bill Belichick is going to go coach the Vikings for 3 games in the middle of the season as part of his contract.
Offense, well, the Vikings offense doesn't need any help.
No, well, we had a rough playoff exit, but so did the whole NFC North between the Lions and us. I was really hoping we go farther this year.
I got to see your star wide receiver play in college.
LSU. Dude, him and Chase and Burrow's on the same team. How did you guys not win 4 national championships?
Well, because Burrow was only the starting quarterback that 1 year.
Oh, well, that would make sense. How long? Wow, those guys, the talent between Chase.
Well, that was that was like it's snowing 9 inches in Louisiana.
Right.
That'll happen once every 150 years. That was
a good point, Jefferson. He's pretty baller. It's funny because my kids are all doing the gritty all the time down the hallway.
All day. Everybody in the universe.
Now that you talk about a good brand, there you go. There's a good brand.
Absolutely. He's a terrible actor. His commercials are awful, but he's young. He'll get there.
He'll get there.
But Nick Saban, or AKA Alabama Jones, his commercials aren't very good either.
Oh, it's funny. I mean, you can't be good at everything. I appreciate you coming on. We'll have everything in the show notes. Obviously, if anyone wants to reach out to you, they certainly can. You've got a super talented team. You're a great person. And I don't even know when I'm going to see you next, but now it makes me want to just sit in the back of a classroom. And I'll tell you what, next time, I think I have your cell phone. Next time in the back of a classroom, I'm just going to FaceTime you. It'll be like our inside joke. It'll be like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like in the back of the class.
And I'll show you what I'm like crazy designing on the screen that's never going to see the light of day. And you're like, that's so awesome. We should do something with that.
That's the hard part is as the company, once you have a brand, obviously you want to do stuff with it and you're continuing to work on it and evolve it. But I can see why creativity on the business side kind of begets more creativity, because it's like the process is so enjoyable and the clientele. And I think there's a lot of opportunity besides just your main brand. We're not going to talk about this episode. Like the White Oak project, I'm just so obsessed with story. We're doing something called Misahus, which is Swedish for cozy. So we're creating a whole brand. It's Misahus by Mark Williams Custom Homes. You're going to see it. I'll send you a link. The branding page is done, all the logos. I'll tell you what, I'll send you the brand packet that I'm developing now.
Do it.
And
I won't audit it. I won't give you any feedback.
No, don't give me feedback. I'm just letting you know what it is, because my poor designer would have a heart attack. But
your stuff is incredible, by the way. Whoever your designer is, if they're listening, really great job, by the way.
They're amazing. And so I think what's so cool is just we're telling stories, and people, I just like Nick, I'm sure we could talk about, I actually offered to go out to Boston and interview Nick in White Oak to do an episode about his whole experience. It'd have to be, honestly, I actually talked to him about doing like a live event where I'd have 3 hours. We'd invite people in, and he's up to his neck in it right now. He can't see beyond tomorrow. Poor guy. He's really in it. I told him, I was like, I know when he's really quiet, like he's in it, and he's been quiet for like a long time.
When he's in it is when I was sending him the new 45 White Oak landing page design yesterday, and I had it password protected, and I sent it to him, and I went outside to like build a snowman. He's like, it's private. That's all I got. It's private. Okay, I'll get you a little login. Let me finish this snowman real quick. It's private. Like I get 1 words from him. That's when he's in it.
So funny. I mean, he is a character. He is a character among himself. He's so funny because I like to give him crap, because it's like, as you get to know people, I mean, I think, again, brand is so personal. And I think like when I see NS, like, yes, a lot of people think it as NS Builders, but obviously there's so much more to it when you know a person. And I think that's kind of what's rewarding about a brand, is like, it's not at face value. Like there's more and more and more. And like the deeper you go, the more time you spend on it. You mentioned 10 years on the website, like, that evolution that kind of goes all the way through. And it's really, I would imagine as a client, like, if you're spending this much time on your brand, and I would encourage anyone listening to do this, yes, it incurs a lot of time. It can cost money to a certain degree. It's not cheap, but the value, I don't even know how you put a number on that. I mean, the actual value.
There is a term, brand value, and I'm not exactly how they calculate it, but I know what company has the highest brand value in the world. It's Coca-Cola. Like the red, Coca-Cola red, you can see a square that's that red. You're like, that's Coca-Cola. You know what I mean? Like, it's whatever it is, it's extremely valuable. And it doesn't have to take a ton of money. It just really depends like what the best solution is for you, where your business is. Find a freelancer, find a small team, just start the process. Just look into it. You know what I mean? I think you and guys like Nick and Vincent Appel from Possible, so many folks like you guys are very good stewards of your brand. And where I typically can create the systems and like the identity system and all of your infrastructure internally and all the creative around it, like you still have to have someone be a good steward. And I've been in like a brand guardian for Nick for the last 10 years. And we're at that point now where like he's become such a good steward of his brand. He doesn't need a brand guardian.
You know,
Right?
that's interesting.
So
You say
that budget
that.
goes elsewhere.
I think it's probably more challenging because Nick doesn't strike me as someone who has a lot of ADHD like I do. He has a lot of energy, but he has a very like focused. He's like a bunch of laser beams coming at you. He's like, but like my wife has been a brand guardian for me because she manages our Instagram.
Yeah.
And she said, I'll do it, but if you post one time, it's over. I won't do it anymore. And it was interesting because I appreciate sometimes you need someone. I can be a little Jim Carrey, and we have to also be aware that we're building $3 to $4, $5, $6 million homes, and people want you to be serious. But and ultimately, someone's not going to build with me if they want a stiff engineer experience of just. I'm not a robot. I'm a human being, and like I try to make it enjoyable, full color, and like you have to be who you are. I think the other thing, brand integrity. I mean, if you are your brand or if you represent your brand, like be you. Don't be somebody else. And I think that goes back to your comment about don't try. I mean, sure, you can be inspired, like Nick's stuff is inspiring. I hope what we put out there is inspiring, but at the end of the day, everyone is inspiring. Just be you, and that's inspiring. And you know, everyone's best brand is themselves. Just be real.
I'll leave you with this because I read this on LinkedIn a couple of days ago. A designer, he has a solo brand called Made by James, and he does some other stuff, but he's from the UK. Really great designer. He posted the other day this one line, and it stuck with me so hard. And it was, people don't work with portfolios, they work with people. So I think there's a very small percentage of people in the world that don't care who they work with. They just want whatever. Here's the check. But when you're working with those people, it doesn't matter anymore. Right. So
that's a mic drop right there.
People.
Thanks for joining the Curious Builder podcast. And thanks again for coming on, Drew. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Mark. I have adrenaline. I have creative adrenaline going now.
I love it. We're excited to announce that the Curious Builder collectives are going into 3 other states. For those not familiar with what the collective is, it lives between what the Contractor Coalition is and a Builder 20 group. What we do in each state is we have a group of 25 to 30 builders that get in a room, and you break up into groups of 9. You spend 45 minutes talking about a set topic, whether it's branding, marketing, contracts, whatever that set topic is for that day. And then you talk for 45 minutes, you get up, you mix up the groups and you do it again, and you're out of there. You'll be out in under 3 hours. We're going to be going to Phoenix, Arizona. Brad Levitt is going to be leading a Curious Collective in Phoenix, Arizona. We are going to San Antonio. We've got David and Angela Penske from Penske Homes leading a group down there. And we have Brad Robinson and Vince Longo in Atlanta, Georgia, also leading a collective, as well as obviously me in Minnesota as well for our 2nd annual collective. So if you're interested in collaborating with other builders, if you really want to dive deep on your business in a person-to-person relationship, ask a lot of questions, the collectives are for you. We also have in Minnesota Interior Design Collective, as well as the Architect Collective. Check out the events page at thecuriousbuilderpodcast.com. Thanks for tuning in to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like this episode, do us a favor, share it with 3 other business owners. The best way that we can spread what we're doing is by word of mouth, and with your help, we can continue to help other curious builders expand their business. Please share it with your friends, like and review online, and thanks again for tuning in.